All right, welcome everybody to the Kidlit Distancing Social. It is Thursday evening, and that means it's time for us and you to get together and have a great time. So we're going to do that tonight for sure. We have a wonderful author and a friend of ours for a long time, Candice Ransom, who is the author of 150 books in every genre or category of children's literature you can imagine. I mean, this is somebody who's just done it all across the entire spectrum of children's books. And she's going to be joining us. You're going to meet her. She and Laura will talk for a little bit. And then it's going to be an open Ask Us Anything session. This is a new idea we had, which is to bring in some of our most knowledgeable friends to just join Laura for an Ask Us Anything session. So that's exactly what's going to happen tonight. So if you have questions, you could be posting them now in the Q&A. Or you could wait, and of course the conversation that Laura has with Candice might bring up some more things or what have you. So we'll be opening that for the entire evening. Those of you who are new to us, or those of you who are not somehow on one of our lists and getting the messages every week, maybe you saw this on Facebook and you'd like to be part of the community and get messages every week when we have new topics and also the replay links. You can do that by going to writeforkids.org, ultimate-cheat sheet, and you get a cool free gift, which is our ultimate children's writing cheat sheet, which is just packed with information about, well, really, it's meant to be a reference that's by your side whenever you're trying to write a book. So you can get that completely free. There's no strings attached. writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet, and you will be on our list. Those of you who are Children's Book Insider subscribers, and I hope that's most of you by now, the new issue of Children's Book Insider was published today, and you should have received your download notice. Check your email for that if you haven't, and I'll send it out again tomorrow just to be sure. But you can see what's included in there, and the article. Let's see. Book publishing today, Not Owning Your Voice, is actually by Candice Ransom. So Laura and Candice will talk a little bit about that today. But you can see everything else that's on there. And again, if you're not a subscriber, we'd love for you to become a subscriber and get this issue and all of our other issues. And the simplest, easiest way to do that is for $5 a month, go to writeforkids.org/CBI. And that $5 a month gets you every issue of the newsletter. It gets you all the Above the Slush piles. See, this month's Above the Slush pile is a really great literary agency, the Seymour Agency. So an opportunity to get your manuscript directly in there above everybody else's for a limited time using the code that's in the current issue of the newsletter. That's in every issue we do in Above the Slush pile. And you also get the full access to the CBI Clubhouse, which is where we have a massive knowledge base and all sorts of stuff like webinars and courses and tons of articles. And that's included in your membership. So it's just $5 a month, writeforkids.com/CBI. All right. I am now going to turn it over to Laura. Are you ready? We had technical hell about 10 minutes before we logged in. And so I'm seeing, are you ready, Laura?
I'm ready.
Is your head in the game?
Yes.
All right, Laura's got you. Have a great time, everybody.
Hello. Yes, I was taking some deep breaths on the sideline there. So we had our slides were in the cloud and the cloud was not giving them up. So that was fun. The cloud was saying, nope, you cannot have your slides tonight, but we managed to get them just in time. Okay, so hello everybody. So now we get to do our fun little feature called Where in the World Are You? This is where we get to see you. So today's Where in the World, and let's see if you can guess where Catherine Piazza is. She sent us some lovely pictures of somewhere she likes to go for inspiration for her writing. Now I know there's not a lot of clues here as to where this might be, so if probably the only way you could guess this, and please put in the chat box if you know, is if you've been there. Okay, so Tina says Norman Rockwell Museum. No, but that is a good guess. That is a good guess. Monet's Garden, no, but that is also a very good guess. France. I'm sure that Catherine would have loved to have taken this picture in France, but no, it's in the United States. This was just recently she took these pictures, so nowhere that she was able to really travel to. I'll let you try it. Along the Wabash River. I don't think so. But anyway, good guess. So I'm going to tell you where this is. So this is the Dallas Arboretum and Botanical Gardens. Isn't that lovely? And Catherine says, this is me in the Dallas Arboretum visiting with Mr. Monet. So good guess, Monet Garden, whoever guessed that. Mr. Shakespeare and Mr. Lincoln. The gardens in their entirety are inspirational. I hope to spend more time there with pen and paper when the weather gets cooler. Yes, I imagine you will, Catherine. So thank you for sending those pictures. And I was on the website looking at these botanical gardens. They are really, really beautiful. So if you are in the Dallas area, check these out for sure. And I love the pictures, the statues she chose to include. I consider Abraham Lincoln a gifted writer myself, as well as an amazing president, because of his speeches. So I think this fits totally with our writing related and illustration related themes here. So thank you, Catherine, for sending those pictures. I want to hear from more of you. So take a picture of yourself in front of a literary landmark or somewhere that inspires your writing, or are you doing some writing related activity, and email me a brief description of where you are and permission to use your photos. And we will include you in a future Kidlit distancing social, and you can send those photos to me attached to an email. Photos should be a JPEG at mail@writeforkids.org, and put "where in the world" in the subject line so that I know what it's all about, because we love seeing you. Okay. So now we get to celebrate. And these are for those of you who are new here, this is a section where we celebrate the successes of you every week. So I've got 3 amazing ones this week. E. Michael Lunsford just published his middle grade paranormal adventure, Derek Hyde's Spooky Scavenger Hunt, with Intense Publications. And this is book 2 of the Derek Hyde series. So that is awesome. Congratulations on that. Whoops, I accidentally maximized my chat box. Now I can't see. Carol Coven Granick's debut book publication, Reenie's Turn, which is a body positive middle grade novel in verse, is published by Regal House Publishing, Fitzroy Books, and it comes out September 13th. So that is coming up. So congratulations, Carol. And Carol also has a really great article in this month's Children's Book Insider on resilience, which we could all use more of right now. So that is very relevant to all of us. So congrats, Carol, on that. And Marie Powell, who's a CBI member, has just published Spirit Sight, which is book 1 in her new Last of the Gifted series with Wood Dragon Books. And this is a medieval fantasy combining magic, mythology, and forgotten legends with the historical realities of Wales in 1282. That sounds really cool. And can you imagine the research that she had to do for that? So Marie, congratulations on that. These all look like amazing books. And I think we all need to put them on our book list. So congrats to all of you. So I want to hear more good news. Email mail@writeforkids.org, that same email address, and put "celebrate" in this particular subject line. And tell me what's going on. And it doesn't even have to be a publication. Any step you've taken in your writing journey that you want to celebrate and acknowledge is awesome. If you finally got the courage to start submitting your manuscript to agents, we want to hear about it. If you finished a first draft of your manuscript, Yay, that's great. If you dove into the editing process, whatever step you're taking, we want to hear about it. So send it to me and we will celebrate with you on a future distancing social. So here's something we're celebrating at CBI. Last week, we hosted an incredible webinar with Pat Zietlow Miller, who is a very, very talented writer. As you can see, it was called The X Factor, Adding Emotion, Compassion, and Heart to Create a Magical Picture Book Manuscript. And it was awesome. And normally after the webinar is over, after the live event, we put it on our Writing Blueprint site and sell it, but we always sell it for $67. The live event is $47. We're going to allow you guys to get access to the recording for 20% off if you are interested. If you heard about this, I did talk about this a couple weeks ago and maybe you missed it or whatever, you now have a chance to get it with for a discount. So here's the link, bit.ly/pat-second-chance. And that second is 2, the number 2, ND. I know it's complicated, but please check that out if you're interested. It was an amazing, amazing webinar on how to add emotional impact and depth to your picture book stories. Okay. Let's see what else we're doing. Okay, we're going to take a poll. Here we go. Let me turn on the poll. So this poll is a little bit different because I am very interested in what you have to say for this. I am polling you with some ideas we have for future webinars that we might put on or future guests that we might have on the Distancing Social. And I want to hear the topics that you are most interested in hearing about and learning about. So please vote on this because we really want to gather this information from you. One of the things that we really want to do with these socials is to kind of tailor them to what you want. And that is always something we try to do with our Writing Blueprints webinars, is to tailor what our customers tell us they really want. So please vote. This is going to be important information for me to have, and I appreciate your input here. Hi, Maria, I see you have to leave, but I'm glad you'll be listening on the replay. Thanks for popping in. Oh, Sharon says she highly recommends Pat's webinar. Yes, thank you, Sharon. It was amazing, amazing. And I was inspired when I was listening to it. Okay, I'm going to give you one more minute to vote. And by the way, this poll is different than our normal ones. You can vote for more than one answer on this. Normally, we only let you vote on one answer. Oh, Barbara, you made a good point there. So I'm going to, when this poll is over, I'll tell you a couple things. Okay, 5 more seconds. This is tough because these answers are very close. We might just have to do all of these. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, I'm going to end the poll. Ta-da! Share results. Okay, well, there's some really close answers here. Narrative nonfiction picture books is first, but then we've got right behind it mysteries. That's one we've been thinking about. And easy readers, interesting. That's awesome. And then not that far behind are the arrests. So thank you very much for those votes. I appreciate that information. So Tina says, wasn't fiction missing from the list? So if you are wondering, how do I write a regular old fiction, picture book, easy reader, middle grade, YA, chapter book? We have writing blueprints already that walk you through that whole process step by step. If you are wondering, how do I write science fiction fantasy? How do I write historical fiction. We have webinars on our Writing Blueprint site called Writing Solutions that detail those two particular genres. We had a great webinar a few months ago with Lionel Bender on breaking into the nonfiction market, where he gave you a really great overview of nonfiction. And we're going to have one coming up from him in the next few months, specifically on writing for the school and library market with nonfiction. So I'm glad to hear that a lot of you are interested in that. That is one we've got in the works. So what I'm going to put on here is the Writing Blueprints website. It's I can't talk and type at the same time. It is writingblueprints.com. Very easy. Go there and check it out. Click under see all, and you'll see everything we've got on there. But historical fiction is on there, and some of you were asking about that in the chat box. And also, like I said, sci-fi, fantasy. And I have a webinar on creative nonfiction picture books, just in general, which you can take a look at. But we can certainly get into more detail with writing the narrative nonfiction with another webinar. So please check out what we've got, because a lot of what you guys already want, we may already have. So, but thank you for that vote. Okay, links of interest. So here's some stuff I've collected over the week. So there is a great post on KM Whelan's site, who's an amazing writing instructor, called Afraid to Let Anyone Read Your Writing, 5 Steps to Move Past Fears. This is a really great post for any of you who are at the stage where you want to join a critique group, or you want to start having beta readers look at your work and give you feedback, but you're nervous about it, and that's completely understandable. She talks on this post about how to get brave, how to go about it, who you should hand over your manuscript to. Different readers are going to serve different purposes. So it's really informative. So her website is called Helping Writers Become Authors, and it's helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And the post was August 24th. So it's just been up for a little while. So if you go to that website, you'll be able to find it really easily. This is a cool thing that a lot of you probably already know about, but Netflix launched a show called Bookmarks Celebrating Black Voices, and it's a collection of 12 5-minute episodes featuring Black celebrities and artists reading aloud children's books by Black authors that highlight the Black experience. And a lot of the readings are done by the authors themselves. And what's really cool about this is it's another way for you to discover really great picture books. But I think it's also just really wonderful often to hear the authors reading their work. So if you're on Netflix, check that out. I just think it's a very, it's just a fun thing to go watch. So there is another great post called Video Marketing for Authors, a beginner-friendly guide on the New York Book Editor's website. And I made a bit.ly link for this because it was a long URL, bit.ly author video marketing. And it gives some great starter tips for using video to market your book. Now, the reason I'm even bringing this to your attention is because I have been reading lately how publishers are expecting more and more that authors be able to market their books online because of bookstores being closed and live events not happening right now. And a lot of sales channels that publishers sometimes rely on that are beyond the bookstores are also being limited. Gift stores, museum gift shops, things like that might be carrying books are either closed or are very limited into how many people they're letting in. Plus, we're having problems with paper shortages and certainly postal issues. It's just hard for books to get around. So more and more book sales are happening online right now than in normal. And because of that, publishers are really expecting authors and really wanting authors to be able to get online and create book trailers or do YouTube videos about their books and help spread the word that way. And a lot of people are not anxious to do that. They're afraid to get in front of the video camera. I get it. This is a really good start for you, this particular post, to get you started. So I just wanted to alert you to that. Okay, now we get to talk with Candice Ransom. So as John said, Candice has written more than 150 books, including 18 books for the Boxcar Children's series. A lot of us have read those. The Time Spies series and the Sunflower Fire series. She wrote the Dungeons and Dragons novel, Key to the Griffin's Lair, and her work includes picture books, easy readers, middle grade fiction, biographies, nonfiction, you name it, she's done it. And more than 45 of her titles have been translated into 12 languages. And we are also lucky enough to have her as a regular contributor to Children's Book Insider. So I am very excited that Candice is here with me tonight. Candice, you can go ahead and turn on your camera and your microphone. There you are. Oh, got to turn on your microphone, unmute your mic.
Yeah.
And there you are. Hi, Candice.
Hello.
I'm just really thrilled that you're here with me because Ask Me Anything's tax my brain. And so I'm really glad that you're here to carry the load with me with all the questions that we are going to get. So I wanted to start out with just asking you a couple questions here. So you've written so many different kinds of books. And while each book is very different, I imagine that you still managed to put a little bit of yourself or your experience, your unique voice into each book. And I wondered, how do you write about such varied topics and still make each book your own or put your own personal stamp on each book that you create?
Well, I didn't start off doing that. And early in my career, real early in my career, when I was trying to become published, I was writing to trends. And I give an example of a book that I wrote and tried to market, which was about a boy who was playing Dungeons and Dragons. And I didn't know anything about any of those things. I wasn't a boy, although later on I could write it from the boy's point of view. I didn't know anything about D&D. I went out and bought the set and then I didn't know what to do with it. So everything I was trying to do was from the outside and not the inside of me. And after a while of many rejections and trying to figure out what I was supposed to be doing and reading a lot of kids' books, I sat down one day and I started a journal in which I wrote down my childhood memories, just random ones, little tiny ones, big long ones. And then when I looked at those, I realized those had, that was something that I knew. That was me, that was my life, that was my place, my setting. I had 15 cousins on one side, so we were a big Southern family. And then I started to write from experience. I fictionalized a lot of it, but that's how I started. And a lot of my books were very autobiographical in the beginning. I had a whole series called 13, 14 and Holding. I mean, those were just stripped right out of my life. They were fiction, but they were real. Then I started to do picture books, and those I did more as an homage to my parents and to people I knew in my neighborhood, because my parents were gone by then. And so I wrote the Big Green Pocketbook, and that's a book that's been around for 27 years, still in print. I think that's 27 or 8. And then as time went on, which is many, many years now, I have a 40-year career, and it's actually 163 books. My list is a little out of date. How do I put myself in some of these that have been going on for so long? For example, you had on the cover up there of Amanda Panda Quits Kindergarten. I was given an illustration by an editor who said, this person has created this character. Can you write a book about it? And she's going to be in kindergarten. And I thought, I didn't go to kindergarten. I didn't know what people did in kindergarten. And it was a tough one for me. But I thought back to as close as I could get to kindergarten, which was actually the year before I started school. And I would go to my sister's classes, as a visitor. I did the sequel to that, Amanda Panda and the Bigger, Better Birthday. And I will tell you, sequels to an original picture book are hard. That was the hardest thing I've ever written, I think. But for that, I had to go back into some corner of my life. And it was one of my cousins, and we were rivals. We were best friends and rivals at the same time. And to one of her birthday parties. And even though the story isn't like that, the emotion is still there.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's interesting. So even when, as your career progresses, it is not uncommon for editors to approach you and say, we have this idea for a book, or here's a illustration, write something, which is a situation a lot of authors envy who are listening. They're like, oh, I want them to come to me. So that's pretty cool. But you still have to find some way to connect to that story on a personal level as the writer in order to really be able to write a good book. That's what it sounds like to me, like you're saying, that you had to go back into your own life and say, how can I connect with this on some level in order to really produce a good book?
All of it comes from inside me somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
Even though it may not look like it at all, you're wondering, where did this story come from? There is some piece of me in there, and I have to keep that. I'm 68 now, and I have to keep my 10-year-old self alive, 5-year-old self, 12-year-old self. They were all different kids in each of those stages. So yeah, that's what I have to tap into.
Yeah. Now, you wrote a really great essay in our recent September issue of Children's Book Insider on writing about very personal topics and making the choice of how to tell those stories, and maybe also how not to tell them as a writer. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes. After my parents died when I was in my early to mid 30s, and it was sudden. And it was one of those things where, like, wait, I'm not done with you people yet, but you're gone out of my life. Actually, in having them gone, I was freed up to remember things. I did not have a great early childhood. It was really pretty bad. And I thought, well, maybe it's time for me to tell that story, because the main people are gone. My sister and I are still around, and we both experienced it. So when I started writing, I started with one poem, and then it turned into a verse novel. It was very short. It was like 25 poems, and was sent around to editors. I had an agent then who I learned later that I was her entire client list. It was one of those things, okay, didn't know that. But one of the editors who saw it suggested that I expand it. And then another one said, turn that into a YA novel. It was meant to be a middle grade verse novel. And he said, you've already done the hard part. You've done the spade work. Well, if you have a really rough experience, you've never really done all of your spade work. And if you have to keep doing it, you have to go back into that place over and over for all the revisions, for all the drafts, for all the editorial suggestions or agent suggestions. And it was not pleasant.
Mm-hmm.
So I actually took that novel with me to Vermont College. I went to Vermont College after I published 80 books. They didn't know what to do with me. They didn't have to do anything with me. I was in a rut. I needed to be there. Let's put it that way. And that was my first project, was to work on that book, which I did. and we expanded it and did all kinds of things. And it got so that it was like a millstone around my neck. I almost couldn't stand this book anymore. So a few years passed after that, and it had been sent around, and everyone said it's too dark, and I thought, okay, dark. So I get to my next school, which is Holland University. I follow my Vermont degree with a master's in children's literature. And for my thesis, I decided to do this story again, but it would be like a young adult memoir. It was not a middle grade, it was not verse, it was told in a narrative. And once again, I found myself in the darkest places. When I got done with that, I wouldn't let anybody read it. It was like, don't read this book. My advisor suggested that I send it to the University of Iowa Press. I was thrilled and horrified at the same time. They read it in a day, and it's long. It was like 300 and some pages. And when they got back to me, they said, we really like this, but can you write it in another book? I thought, okay, you just don't like the way I wrote it. You want my story, but you don't like this format. And I attempted it for maybe 2 days, and then I just stopped. This was not going anywhere for me. So along comes, we need diverse books, which is, one thing. And then underneath of that comes hashtag own voices. And it's been a while. I mean, it's been 5 years since that hashtag came about and that movement started. And it was, caught on like wildfire through social media and other places. And now you'll see it everywhere. I thought I had been behind the times. So this summer I stopped and I thought, I don't really understand own voices. I need to figure it out. So I spent a month online reading articles and essays and stuff. And all these sources are on my own piece that's in the Children's Book Insider. And I came to the conclusion that it seemed like some of these movements are done by one person. Someone says, let's do this. And they come up with a hashtag, and then it's off because it catches on. Everything is in that kind of mode now. And it bothered me in a number of ways, in that people were confused. What does it mean? And then this person that started it put up a list of requirements that you had to follow. If you, as the author, did not have the same experience as your main character, you could not own that voice, that you could not claim that book as an own voices. Well, of course, people are, worried, and is this my voice? And finally I thought, why are we worrying so much about this? I added up all my identities that I could use as own voices. I have 8. And I don't want to write about any of them anymore. I tried it once. I tried it twice, and I decided that this is just not for me. I don't want to be out there in that way. I've published enough books now that I want to write something that isn't so dark, maybe, that isn't all about me.
Sure. And so what you're saying is it's really a choice that every author has as to what they choose to write about, how, you don't have to delve into these painful topics in your writing if you don't want to.
No, you don't.
And I think that is absolutely legit. And it sounds like you have found ways to put a little bit of yourself into all of your writing, but in a way that feels right to you. And I know that you also have said that you love writing because you love experiencing the world, learning new things, finding out about really interesting, joyful things about the world, and maybe connecting those parts of yourself to your books. And I think that is just as valuable for writers to do. Absolutely. So that's great. So you write a lot of nonfiction as well. And how do you find sort of a connection or an interest. I imagine some of your nonfiction is also assigned to you by educational publishers.
Yes.
So, as someone who has a wide author footprint, as you do, very often you are writing books that are assigned to you. Publishers approach you. So how do you generate that excitement and that dedication to the topic if it's one that you didn't think of yourself?
Okay, most of my educational nonfiction is for young kids,
Mm-hmm.
K through 3, third grade. I will not do an 8th grade book on soccer star, so-and-so or whatever. I'm just not going to do it. And I have things that I will turn down. I don't do sports. I don't do character traits. I don't do math because I can't.
Mm-hmm.
But so I tell them I do science and I do social studies, which covers history and all kinds of things. But I've been asked to do things that aren't in either of those categories, and like monster trucks and stock cars, which was brand new to me. I was actually excited to do those. Who doesn't like a monster truck? And stock car racing was something that we used to call it drag racing when it was not as legitimate as it is now. NASCAR. Some of the topics I will struggle with, but because I know it's a short book and I'm not going to spend 100 years on this, then I will go ahead and do it. Often you only have sometimes only 2 weeks to do these books.
Mm-hmm.
A month is considered a luxury. So you can almost stand anything for 2 weeks, I figured.
Yeah.
But for the ones that I'm coming up with, my ideas, Bones in the White House, that just came out in February. I have another one coming out in, I'm not sure what year it is, 2021 or 2022, I'm not sure, but it's a biography of Margaret Wise Brown, a picture book biography. These are subjects that I love and have loved for a long time. The Margaret Wise Brown book, if it comes out in 2022, I will have spent 20 years on that book.
Wow.
You don't love a subject, you're going to have to spend a long time on it. 5 years. I was 5 years on Bones in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
So how are you going to keep your passion alive? Because you can't do these in 2 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
It's not work for hire. It's not a very small book for, first grade that has a word count of, 150 words and, put in a map and so forth.
Right.
No, you're on your own and you do everything on your own nickel.
Mm-hmm.
You have to travel, you travel yourself. So you had better love it.
Mm-hmm.
And there have been a number of ideas that I have had that I thought, I really want to do a book about this. And then I think, well, do I really want to spend 5 years, 3 years on this subject?
Mm-hmm.
And there are topics that I choose to do that didn't sell.
Mm-hmm.
Probably the best book that I have ever written, ever, has not sold and probably will not sell. And I spent 3 years, did travel. The manuscript, I think, is the best I've ever done. It's not going to sell. Can you live with that?
Why do you think it's not going to sell?
Well, I raised the bar for myself on on the format of it's a nonfiction picture book. And I told it from 2 points of view. It's about the spider that was taken on the Skylab mission. Skylab was the first space station in 1973, and they had 1, 2, 3 missions. And on the second one, they took up high school experiments to see how they would behave in weightlessness. They were there for 2 months. One of the high school students suggested, how can a spider spin a web in 0 gravity? And so I read about this and then I was off and running. I ordered all kinds. I bought a lot of books. I was thrilled with this story. I loved it. And in my manuscript, it starts out with a spider. It's a very small thing. So I'm sitting there thinking, okay, The spider is spinning webs. What's an illustrator going to do all the way through this book? Draw a tiny little spider that's spinning a web against a black background? Oh, it's not. So I also included the mission, the 3 astronauts on the mission and their difficulties. And they had many of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I found a parallel between the spider who had to perform and they had to perform. So it's done in 2 points of view. That's one problem.
Mm-hmm.
The second problem is I found a lot of editors don't like spiders. Okay, I can't do anything about that.
Yeah, really.
There were a couple of editors who loved it, but said their publishing house would ruin it.
Huh. That's interesting.
It is interesting, and I know exactly what they meant. They liked my story. They wanted me to tear apart my web of the lyrical format that I chose and probably put it in a straight narrative or something,
Mm-hmm.
which I did not want to do. And
Right.
they knew that. So, 3 years, and I look at it and I think, I enjoyed the journey.
Yeah.
I loved the journey.
Well, and I think that's a great way of looking at it. And that's a tough decision to make as a writer. You've had this happen a few times where if you changed what you did, it might sell, but that would go against your vision for the work. So how do you make that decision? Or is that something everybody just has to figure out on their own, whether or not they would make those changes?
Yeah, I have a couple of ideas, and I think I pull them out every once in a while. I think nobody's going to take this. Just nobody. Put it back.
Mm-hmm.
But the spider one, I really was challenging. I wanted to challenge myself. I wanted a new format of writing. I wanted to see if I could do it, and I did it. And my agent loved it. She thought it was the best thing ever.
Mm-hmm.
But we couldn't sell it. We may yet, still.
That happens. Sometimes you just have to wait a couple years and try again. You've got a new crop of editors.
Yes, that's right. I'm still here. They come and go.
Exactly. You will outlast them all. So.
Seems like it. I don't know. But the Margaret Wise Brown book is a case of that. That manuscript started going around in 2005. It was rejected. I rewrote it. It was rejected. I rewrote it, on and on and on. When it sold in 2016, I felt like I could stop hitting myself in the head with a hammer. It was that much of a relief. It's like, oh God, this is finally out. It'll come out someday.
Yeah. Well, we will definitely celebrate that on our social. But you are not the first author I've talked to who has had that experience. And it's can be very frustrating, I'm sure, but that perseverance and always working on a new project, I think probably helps so that you've got something else to put your energies into.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just put it all in one basket.
Absolutely.
Because and it's such a slow process of hearing from people. And, if you just sit and fret, which I did after my first book was accepted, I sat there and I thought, all right, people, where are you? They weren't coming.
Yes.
So I had to go to them.
Well, we've got a lot of really great questions here, so I'm going to start tossing them out to you here. Susan asks, how do you know if your picture book manuscript should actually be a chapter book or even an easy reader? You've written all those different levels in there. So have you ever had a story start out as one and then morph into something else?
Yes, I did. I wrote a picture book that I believed was a picture book about me and my sister. And I wound up, I sent it around. This is back before I had an agent, and I did everything myself. And it didn't sell for one reason or another. It was weak, probably, for one thing. Let a few years go by, and then I realized that it was going to be a middle grade novel. It was actually a bigger story. It didn't fit in that. That happened another time. I wrote a picture book, and an editor suggested that it was 2 picture books. And I thought, really? So I thought, I'm not sure how to divide this. So I sat and thought over it for a long time. And then I realized I think it's a novel. If someone thinks that one thing is two things, then maybe it's really too big for even that. Splitting it wouldn't work. But making it something bigger
Right.
would. So that's happened to me twice that I know of. As far as going backwards with that, I'm not sure I've ever had a novel that should be a picture book. But it's hard. Sometimes you will not hit on the format right away. You would love for your story idea to come to you and say, now, let's get busy. But before we do that, this is how I want you to make me. It's not going to do that for you. You'll have to decide, and you may have to do it one way and have it not work and then do it another.
So when you say it was bigger than a picture book, what was bigger? Was it the idea? Was it that the character needed to be more complex than you could make the character in a picture book? What part needed to be bigger to be a longer story, do you think?
In the first book, my early picture book, it was, and what it actually turned out to be was a trilogy, a middle grade trilogy. But I wrote a picture book about one thing, and that was it was called My Sister's Room, and it was about my sister who had left home, and I was lonely, and I would go into her room and, you know, look at her furniture and things like that. It was kind of a downer for a picture book, and no one really jumped on it. So later on, when I was thinking about writing about my sister and I again, I thought about that book and got it out, and I thought this really, it was like a scene. It really wasn't a picture book. It was part of something bigger. And when I saw it anew a few years later, I thought this is one scene in a novel. And that was how I recognized it. The other one, as I told you, someone told me, it was an editor who said, I think this is two picture books, and that didn't make much sense to me either. So you'll get clues along the way from people who help. If you have a reading group, a writing group, people who can, you can bounce things off of, they may be of help.
And I imagine reading all different kinds of children's books helps you be able to identify what your idea needs to be, because you need to be familiar with what is the difference between a chapter book and a middle grade book, or a middle grade and YA and that kind of thing. So I imagine that helps too, just as your general knowledge as an author grows, you can start making these decisions.
One of the hardest, to go back to this person's question, one of the hardest things is to decide, is this a picture book or is it an easy reader? And I used to tell people that writing a picture book was harder than writing anything. Now I'll stand here and tell you that writing an easy reader is harder than writing even a picture book. It's a very fine line, but a picture book is really meant for kids to be read to. Lap books, you know, or they're in a group and the librarian or the teacher is reading aloud and showing pictures. It's that kind of experience. Whereas an easy reader is the child who has reached the ability to read on their own. So it's a lot of dialogue, it's a difference in size of font, how much white space is used, and the pictures in an easy reader are meant to provide a clue if the child isn't able to decode the text. They can look, because the picture has to match the text. That is a requirement in easy readers. In a picture book, the illustrator runs with your story, your text, and expands on it so that there are other things going on, things that you didn't necessarily write about. There's a dog in there. You never wrote a dog in that story, but they put it in anyway. So what you really have to do is look at your manuscript and decide, look at a lot of picture books, look at a lot of easy readers, and figure out the difference. Right. Where it might fall.
Yeah, great. AJ has two questions here that are very related. First of all, what is going through your mind when you are conceptualizing a story? How do you rely upon your imagination? And the second question is, how do I get from thinking about writing a book to actually writing the idea down? So I think what we want to know is, what is your process going from that idea to starting to write?
Okay, first of all, I don't have any imagination. People say I do, but I really don't. I am not the kind of person that can write Harry Potter. I can't write zany books. I can't write, there's books that I look at and I think I could never have come up with this in a million years. I'm a very reality-based person. So my ideas come from experience, going outside and walking. A lot of them come from reading, and I read widely. I mean, I read everything. Newspapers. I'm into print, not so much reading online because it hurts my eyes after a while. But magazines you would never dream of picking up. I would read, go to a doctor's office. I'm reading everything. I take a book and read the magazines. The initial idea will come to me as a tiny little spark. What is harder is how you're going to make that connection. What part of you connects with this idea to make it into a book? It's how you perceive things. We can all write bird books, for example. Every one of us, give us an assignment, let's all write about birds. Every one of us will have a different book, a different bird, a whole different story, because we perceive that subject differently and we make our personal connections. So that is what has to take place when I get my first idea. Getting to the point where I'm able to start writing, or at least start something, that takes longer. So I've had a book sitting on my desk for 4 years. I have written the prologue many times. This is the most well-polished prologue. It shines. It's so great. First chapter is not coming. I have 6 notebooks filled with information. This is a book that required a lot of research. It's a novel, but it has a ton of research in it. I think I reached the point where I fell in love with the research more than the story. This book may never get off the ground, but I keep it on my desk just so I don't lose sight of it. And it's not unheard of for a writer to simmer on an idea for a few years before it comes to fruition. You're not ready for some reason or another. And if you try to force it, as I have clearly in writing a prologue, you may find yourself stumped for a really long time. You can't make that leap from those first few pages to whatever has to happen next. So that's really kind of a personal thing.
Yeah. And I think that's really the trick. Everybody has to find their own way of getting into the story and getting that idea to start showing up on the page. And I think a lot of that is just practice, just doing a lot of writing.
It is practice. And I also tell, I teach writing at graduate level. I tell my students, I hate to tell you this, but every book that you write, all of that you learned in that book will not apply to the second one. Each project comes with its own set of rules, but it doesn't tell you what they are until you're deeply into it. So, you have your little toolbox of writing tricks and techniques and all that, and you can use some of them. But for the most part, that book will have its own set of tools, and it won't reveal them until you're in it a while.
So it sounds like really having a willingness to be able to stop if you need to and figure out the tools you need and develop those and then go back to the project is important. And I think a lot of maybe less experienced writers get hung up on that. They think I should know how to do this, and they just sort of plow ahead. But you're right, each project is its own learning experience.
That's why we have second book syndrome. Your first book sold and it did really well. Now they've asked you to write another one, or you're going to write another one, and you are really up the creek, or so you feel. It happened to me. It happens to almost everybody. That second book is really, really hard.
But you have a lot of good company. So I've heard a lot of authors say that. Let's see. Got a lot of great let's see. Do you have any suggestions for educational publishers to contact that are looking for new authors? Oh, specific publishers here. I'm an elementary substitute teacher and have wanted to get started in the educational publishing market. Would be most interested in writing for the K-3 market. So, for example, these first of all, can you explain work for hire to people who are listening who might not understand what that is? Because a lot of educational publishers do work for hire.
Yes, really almost all of them.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the trade publishers will do some work for hire as well.
Mm-hmm.
Work for hire is just what it sounds like. You do the work, you get paid a flat fee. You don't get an advance. You don't get royalties. You don't get your picture on the book.
Mm-hmm.
You get your name on the cover and your copyright, and that is it. You're done.
Mm-hmm.
And you move on to the next one, more or less. That I started work for hire back when my main nonfiction educational publisher switched to work for hire. Up until that point, I had been getting advances and royalties, and it was all new to me. And I thought, I really don't quite know how to do this. And they had asked me to do really young books. And they wanted me to learn mechanical formats. And they asked me to write about pollination of flowers for first graders. And I thought, it was called Parts of a Flower. And I said, do I have to put in all those parts? You know, the lady parts and the man parts? Yes, but for first graders. And I was flummoxed on this project. This was my first one. I remember going to a university library and I thought, I've got to be a botanist. This is the only way I'm going to make it through this.
Yes.
So I did way too much work, but I had to do that to understand how this works for my first book.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started talking to other people who did this work for hire, and it sounds like an enormous task. This publisher happened to give me a lot of time, which was good because I needed it.
Mm-hmm.
I had to do a lot of revising. My word count was too much. My language was too old for this word group. And I had been writing picture books. I thought this would be easy for me, but it wasn't. Mm-hmm. So if you want to work for K-3, if that's your interest, and it's where I like to be, I like little kids, mainly because the books are shorter and the topics are a little simpler. You're not tackling, some huge thing. But you still have to explain it on their level. So in a way, that's really hard because this person is an elementary school teacher or substitute. You have a leg up, trust me. Educational publishers love teachers because they will catch on how to do this and get the language right. Now, how do you get yourself out there? Well, you can look at Children's Book Insider, who has announcements. There was one in August for Capstone Press asking for a sample. If you haven't been published, then the best thing to do is not say, I haven't been published, I don't know what to do. Just give them a sample of writing that you would do. You have to look at their books, whichever publisher you're aiming for. You need to find it. You can find them online a lot, and you can actually read right on through some of them. And you can understand the language, the page length, what they look like physically, how much white space. They almost always use photographs because it's cheap. It's true. They use stock photos. So very few illustrators. And you'll understand what they look like. If you're a teacher, you probably have seen a million of them. So you can write a sample that will work for them. And then explain what your specialties are. If you don't want to do sports, if you don't want to do math like I do, maybe you don't want to do science. You're just not strong in that. And it doesn't interest you that much. They put people's samples and their letters in a file, and then they bring them out when they need them. So you kind of have to start at the bottom to get on the so-called stable. But once you produce, and then you'll be called. They'll send you an email and say, we're doing a series on spooky things. There are 6 books. 2 have been claimed already. There are 4 titles left. Do any of these interest you? That's pretty much how it works. And you say yes or no, or you're busy, you can't really do this, because the turnaround times on these is really short.
Yeah. I was going to say, you have to be able to meet a deadline, and they don't give you a lot of time because they are producing books pretty quickly.
Yeah, they're so I've had to do my research and an outline, all of my research and a coherent outline in 10 days.
Wow.
I've done that a lot, actually.
Mm-hmm.
There are also packagers who package for educational publishers, and I work for 2 of those.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say, I'm looking it up right now on my phone. The webinar we did with Lionel Bender on breaking into the nonfiction market, he spoke extensively about educational publishers and packagers. He himself runs a book packager.
Right.
And he, I'm looking up the exact name of that, and if John's listening, he can do that for me. I want to give you the exact title of that Writing Solutions webinar we did, but it came with an extensive list of publishers and book packagers. So definitely go to writingblueprints.com and look at all of our tools. It's one of our Writing Solutions webinars, and I will keep scrolling through to find the exact title for you. I should know, but we do so many of these, I forget exactly what we called it. And here comes John. What was the name? The name of Lionel Bender's webinar. Can you look it up for me? Okay. I'll put that in the chat box in just a moment. But for those of you who are teachers and interested in that, this was a lot of what he talked about. But yes, being a teacher definitely gives you a heads up. In fact, a lot of the publishers specifically say, we're looking for teachers who write for us. So that's great. Let's talk a little bit about fiction writing here. Can you talk a little bit about combining narrative and dialogue? I actually had several dialogue related questions. So let me give you the other 2 and see if you can just give us one brilliant answer on writing with dialogue. So Kathleen asked, how often do you have to state who is talking? Like, identify the speakers within dialogue. And also, do you have to add dialogue tags constantly in the conversation? I imagine this depends on the age you're writing for as well. So can you talk a little bit about just dialogue in general?
And dialogue tags. Mm-hmm. Okay, yes. In fact, I think I have her question. As an adult, we are able to keep track of, there's a particular author I love. Her name is Kate Atkinson. She's a British writer, and she will go on for what seems like 3 pages in which there's this conversation, 1-liners, 2-liners, and no tag. And after a while, I have to stop and count, work my way back. And who is this again? It's only 2 people, but it's confusing. Yeah. Kids don't have as much of that ability. So, for example, the younger kids in fiction, 2nd and 3rd grade, they really need to have the dialogue tag. And while we think it looks annoying, it doesn't to them. Also, it just kind of, it's a sight thing. You actually will lose. It won't stand out as much as you think it does, because you're typing it, you're writing it. Like, how many times do I have to say, said this, said that, asked, whatever. For older kids, 4th, 6th, and on up into middle school, you can start skipping. You can have conversation between 2 and maybe even 3 people. And you can put in a bit of business instead of a dialogue tag. So-and-so is doing something, tying their shoe, turning the page of a book, or they're, sipping their Coke or whatever. That helps keep down the saids and the asks and all those things. For the most part, dialogue tags should be straight. Put in said, put in asked, and don't don't use adverbs unless they're really important. And don't put in retorted and, all those kinds of different ways of saying something, because that calls attention to it. When we're reading, our eyes just skip right over the word said. We pick up the name of the person and then not really what else it is. So there's that. The question about the dialogue and the narrative, how to keep a balance. That's a really good question. For me, I actually look at the page and see how the page is looking. If I see, if it's for younger kids in particular, second and third graders, they need a lot of dialogue because it breaks up blocks of narrative. So again, it depends on the age group of your audience. For older kids, they read more narrative and can take it. I still look at, see how it sits on the page. If I've got an entire page of narrative, unless it's a lot of action and very exciting, if the sentences are short, if the paragraphs are short, that's okay. But I've got a lot of description that is in a big block and nobody's said anything for a while, I think it's time. So basically you use your eye and look and see how it sits on the page. And you get this from reading. If you've read 1 million books over your lifetime, you will know what will tire your eye and what will keep the story fresh, physically even.
Right. And I think with the younger kids, especially those easy readers, like you said, and the early chapter books, white space is very important on the page, which dialogue does. It creates more white space around the blocks of text. But also, I think anything going on too long, a conversation going on too long, kids are going to get bored. They want something to happen. But again, like you said, if you have a big block of narrative where there's just all this stuff happening that a young reader has to keep track of as they're reading the book themselves, you might want to say, let's break that up with a little bit of dialogue. So
Yes.
Also kind of thinking about the abilities of your reader and their attention span and all of those things are also very important. Okay, so I'm putting in the chat box here. The name of our webinar with Lionel Bender was The Children's Nonfiction Market, How to Break In and How to Succeed. And so that's on our writingblueprints.com site. And again, a great overview. He talks a lot about educational, though he's going to do another one for us that really focuses on the educational market. But this is a great sort of introduction and a lot of good resources about who those publishers are that you could start looking at. Okay, so in nonfiction, how do you use a narrative voice or do you write more factually, more sort of expository style? Obviously, it depends on the book you're writing, but what do you feel you gravitate towards and what do you think kids like in the nonfiction?
Well, it actually depends on the story you're telling. The factual kind of voice works best in an educational market, because that's what they want. They don't want any fancy writing. You don't have time. But when you're researching your book, your project, you'll probably be thinking of the voice that you want, the kind of narrative style that you want. And what I do is I kind of match it to books that I have read. I look at a ton of nonfiction picture books, for example, and also the middle grade, nonfiction middle grades. And I look at the style and I think, okay, this book was about an artist and it has a very lyrical, poetic style that paints pictures similar to the way the artist painted pictures. The text matches the subject. The style matches the subject. Some of the middle grade nonfiction books that I've read, I can't tell them from an adult nonfiction book. They're so they've done such a wonderful job of creating a compelling narrative. You know, Steve Scheinman's, the one about the bomb.
Shinkin, yeah.
Yes, fabulous book.
Shinkin, yeah.
Yeah, Scheinkin. Some, you know, and that it could be an adult book easily.
Mm-hmm.
But basically, I match the style. I finished a nonfiction book last week that I've been working on for a couple of years. I chose to write it in, I'm going to say verse rather than poetry, because it's a jaunty story. And it was about a subject that needed to be jazzy. And so I wrote in kind of a scat, jazzy style. The manuscript is told in this style. It seemed to need that rather than a straight narrative. For the book that just came out, Bones in the White House, I used a kind of almost an ethereal narrative. I think that's what my editor called it. It's lyrical, but not entirely all the way through, because there's a lot of stuff happening and it covers a 30-year time period. But she says that I just have this kind of, she calls it romantic, and it's a romantic style. That is not a word I would have thought of for it.
Mm-hmm.
The Margaret Wise Brown book, I have been reading Margaret Wise Brown books for 20 years and writing about her. And I wanted to capture the way she wrote in her own story.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what I attempted to do.
Mm-hmm. Does it take you a while to kind of zero in on the style for each story? Do you have to experiment a bit before you?
Oh, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Bones in the White House went through, I don't know how many drafts. It was dry. I had this thing running along the bottom that I thought would be really cool. I'm going to put a timeline in here on every page, and we'll use it with tiny little mastodons to, it was horrible. And then I decided I wanted to be like, the Ferris wheel book, Mr. Ferris's Great Wheel, whatever it is, that one. I loved the way that she did the story in one part of the narrative, and then there were factual things that were kind of in a box next to it. That's how I started Bones in the White House.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody said, get rid of the box, because I was cramming in all kinds of stuff. And what worked in her book did not work in mine. And I just had to learn the hard way. The best advice I got was from my agent, who, after many drafts of this, she said, here's what I'm going to tell you. Pretend you are reading this book to a room full of bored first graders. I thought, okay, that's a pretty tall assignment. They will not sit still for this thing running along the bottom. They won't sit still for the boxes because they won't understand it. It was too hard. And even though the book isn't necessarily for a first grader, I understood what she meant. So when I finally revised the book, which I did while I was teaching one summer at Holland University, my audience was the next best thing to a room full of bored first graders. It was the last day of the term, which is 6 weeks, and everybody was tired. They were fried brain people. So I had 5 minutes to read this manuscript, and it had better be good.
Yeah.
That was my benchmark. So they were still awake.
Good.
You know, I got comments and that sort of thing. It wasn't exactly a hostile audience, but still. So I spend a lot of time matching what style I'm going to use, and I may come up with something new, something I've never done before.
Mm-hmm.
Every one of these books has been different.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So I've gotten a couple questions here about finding the energy to create, especially during this time, which I know is a tough one. I don't know anybody who really can answer that very well right now.
Well, my answer will be about like what everybody else's was. My last contact with the outside world was the first weekend in March. I did a school visit on a Friday. I left and did my retreat, which was, it's about 80 miles away from me. And then I came back and the roof fell in.
Mm-hmm.
I have not talked to anybody until tonight. This is the truth. This is my only contact in 6 months. So I'm pretty pent up, as you can probably tell. I've had I've had conversations with my agent and my editors, but that's it. And writing friends, but no real industry or communication. So I did what everybody else did. I did nothing. I couldn't do anything except be afraid for March, most of April. And then I had to do something. I mean, I just couldn't drive myself insane. I started doing craft work. I made projects and I gave them away. So I had something on my dining room table at all times. This was something that I used to do years ago. I did scrapbooking, only all of mine were weird and not like what anybody else was doing. But it was a way for me to work through work problems. I would, go into my scrapbooking area and just fool with paper and glue. And while you're physically working with something with your hands, the back of your mind is actually working on something. It took a long time of doing these crafts. Probably 3 months before I finally woke up and was able to work again. So yeah, it's been 6 months?
I know. But that's a great idea. I love that about doing something with your hands. Kind of helps your brain kick into gear.
I'll tell you what else I did. I went outside. I got away from my home office. I got away from the dining room table, which I also work on. And I sat outside and I took books with me. And I would get up in the morning and take my walk and go straight to the porch, eat my bowl of cereal. And I read I would read into the book. I wouldn't read an entire book. I just dragged out stuff from my library because the libraries were closed. Fortunately, I have a big home library. I picked out things I've never read. I picked out things I hadn't read in 20 or 40 years. And then I journaled a little bit. And that helped because I would spend a half a day out there until it would actually get too hot to sit there. And then I would come in and work on a craft project or whatever, just housework.
Yeah.
But changing your scene was a big thing for me because I spend all of my time in this house. Anyway, so the lockdown wasn't that bad, but as time has gone on, it is bad for me because I don't go anywhere still.
Yeah. Those are great suggestions. We had a question here about someone who's a newbie, and she's asking, is it normal to feel discouraged, and how do I keep the faith? I really want to have a children's book published. Every new writer goes through this, especially as they start learning how much they don't know and how much they need to learn. And certainly when you start submitting, you have to keep the faith. So how did you get through that phase of your career?
Okay, well, it goes back so far. First of all, there was nothing when I started to write. There was no Children's Book Insider. There were no CBI, SCBWI didn't exist. There was no classes. There was nothing. So there were a few books on writing, and that was it. Nothing on writing for children, which I wanted to do. And I started when I was 15. So we're talking a really long time ago. But that's what I decided I wanted to be. How was I going to do this? Well, I would read the writing magazines. There were 2. They're still there, Writer's Digest and The Writer. And I would read them in the library because I couldn't afford them. I was only 15. And I would look at the markets for magazines. And they would have children's magazines in there, Jack and Jill and some of those. While I was working on what I thought would be a book, I was also writing the short things. I could read the magazines because they were in the drugstores or in the grocery store, and I understood, what they wanted and how long they had to be. And because I was only 15 and 16, I was still, that childhood kid was not that far away. I knew what kids liked. I wrote short things. That's how I got started.
Mm-hmm.
While I'm working on my really bad book and feeling discouraged, I wrote short pieces and sent them out. My theory was to keep 25 articles, essays, short stories out at all times. And this is back when you mailed everything.
Wow.
If something came in rejected, I either wrote something new and sent it out, because I always had to have 25. And then they started selling. And I would think, well, this is just, I've got to write something else. I got to keep the 25 going. If you write enough and submit it, my theory is that it's like spaghetti. Throw it against the wall, something will stick. It's basically practice and just gritting your teeth and sending it out.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Writing your first book without having ever written anything else is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It really is. I recommend that people start to write shorter things
Mm-hmm.
and kind of ease your way into the writing the book.
Mm-hmm.
First of all, if you write for magazines or for online magazines or whatever, you have a shorter turnaround time. You get a byline. You have credits. You get paid sometimes. And you feel better. It helps boost your confidence.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you're going into the long haul of writing the book, rewriting the book, sending the book to the agent, waiting and waiting and waiting, you'll have more confidence.
Mm-hmm.
And you'll still be working on your little short things.
Yeah.
Because
That's
they're
right.
always needed.
Mm-hmm. That's great advice. And I had a question from someone asking, she's a baby boomer. She's 66, so close to your age, and saying, I'm just getting started with my writing. So what advice do you have? And is it any different from that? Does it matter? Doesn't matter what age you are. If you're getting started, do you recommend start with the short stuff as you're developing your skills?
I still do.
Mm-hmm.
Also, you need to be reading.
Yeah.
It's not enough to say I want to write a children's book or whatever. For
Mm-hmm.
every genre that I broke into, and particularly for picture books, because that was tough, I read 500 books.
Mm-hmm.
I went to the library every week. I brought home 25 books and I sat down with them.
Mm-hmm.
I put them into two piles: books I think I can write or that I liked and would hope to write like that one day, and books that I knew I couldn't do or didn't particularly like. That was just not for me.
Mm-hmm.
I did that for a year. I think I stepped it up to 25 every time I went, turn them back in, get another 25. Then I started typing up the manuscripts. That's another trick I do.
Mm-hmm.
So I understood, because when you're looking at, say, a picture book, you're looking at art and a finished product. What did that manuscript look like when it went to the editor? It didn't look like that. So I would type them up to get the art away from the book.
Mm-hmm.
And, that whole production, hardcovers and everything. So I understood. Of course, it was probably changed, but I had an idea of what it looked like.
Mm-hmm.
I did that with chapter books. Probably read at least 200 chapter books before I wrote a chapter book.
Mm-hmm.
I started to type them up. I type up the first chapter, the second chapter, maybe 3 chapters. There was one instance when I typed up an entire book. It was short, but it helped me. First of all, when you're reading and trying to study a book or study anything, reading is something you do faster than you do typing.
Mm-hmm.
You can Xerox something, you can highlight it. You're still reading it. When you're typing it, you're slowing down and you're thinking about what you're doing. You almost become the writer that wrote that book.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that everybody I tell this to, they go, oh, I can't do that. I do it for my research. I type up huge blocks of research, particularly if I'm trying to understand a concept that I don't understand.
Mm-hmm.
I will slow myself down by typing it up.
Hmm. That's great. I never thought about that with research, but that would definitely help you.
And nobody wants to do it. I think it's too
No.
hard. You have to put the time in. You actually have to put the time in.
Yeah.
And I still do. You know, I've been in this business 40 years. I'm working harder than I did when I was in my early 20s
Mm-hmm.
because I know more now. And also there's more being demanded of us.
Right. Right.
So for that person who is 66, I'm 2 years older. I'm still older than you are. I'm older than everybody, it feels like. You have so many resources at your disposal that I'm envious that you can plunge into something with there's some trepidation, but there's also joy.
Mm-hmm.
There are days, many days, when I wish I could go back to when it was new for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I had that joy.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So go ahead.
Just do it.
Just do it.
Yes. Awesome. Well, I'm not going to keep you too much longer here. I know it's late where you are, and we've kept you way longer than I intended because you've just been so generous with all your expertise here. I had just two sort of categories of questions I would like to ask you to end the night with. First of all, several people have asked you, how do you prioritize which projects you're going to work on and juggle multiple ones? And I was going to ask you, after what you just said, do you still try to have 25 things out there at a time now?
Oh no.
Oh, good.
I hated giving up the short pieces, but now I'm doing a lot of books, and I'm also doing research books, and that takes up so much time. But I
Mhm.
still love doing them. I write craft articles for CBI. I love doing that,
Mhm.
because it's something you can do and it's done. It's not something that's going to drag on over 5 years or whatever. I keep a balance of projects. On the dining room table at the moment, I have a book that I need to write this month, which is an easy reader. It's under contract. That's there. I'm waiting to hear from the editor. I have a new picture book that I have been trying to get to for 4 years. One thing the pandemic has done for a lot of us is that we have settled down.
Mm.
You can't run around anymore, so you might as well get the work done.
Mm.
So I have that there. I am starting a new novel
Mhm.
that has been, I started it probably around the first of the year, thinking about it. Now I'm ready to start, not writing it yet, but I'm at what I call the journaling stage, where I'm talking to myself about it on paper.
Mhm.
There'll be issues coming up, point of view, and the time period and that sort of thing that I have to settle. And I'm not there yet, but I just start easing myself into it. So that's 3. What else is out there? Oh, I have a new nonfiction book that I will start to research this fall. This will be one of those projects that will take years.
Yeah.
So I've just done a couple of those, and I'm not, but I love the subject, and I'm happy to. So I'm compiling materials. I
Mhm.
have a shelf filled with probably 30 books. I buy the books because the libraries are closed,
Yeah.
basically. And I have a notebook packed with articles and things that I've either typed or downloaded.
Mhm.
So that can wait.
Wow. So when you get up in the morning, if you don't have something that is due that day that you have to work on, do you just kind of look over everything and say, what do I feel like working on today?
Well, I'll tell you, one of the things that I didn't do during the pandemic was that I dropped my calendar. Almost the day of we were, had that problem, was like, I kept 2 calendars. One was like, what am I to do this week? What projects do I need to move forward? What else has to be done? Contact this person, that sort of thing. The other one is a record of what I actually did do that day. That's something that I didn't start doing until a few years ago, because you would check off the things on your to-do list. Maybe you would do them all. Maybe you'd have to migrate some to another day or another week, or you just forget about them. But what did I actually do in a day? Some days would go by in a blur. And that's the problem with writing. If you're an illustrator, you can see what you've done in a day. You saw this. We don't see anything. A lot of times we see nothing, you know, we've had to get rid of it because it wasn't any good. Or we've made no progress or very little progress. So I kept that record. So those were the two things I kept. When the pandemic started, I just stopped. I wasn't going to write a word. I didn't want to say what was happening. I didn't want to keep a journal on the pandemic. I have not, because I don't want to.
Right.
So it was about 2 weeks ago, I realized that I had no to-do list on my, and I have actually got two book contracts during this time. And I'm not keeping track of things very well because even though I'm sitting here all day and I'm not going anywhere, I'm forgetting things. So I thought I need to get a weekly to-do list again. And I ordered one on Amazon. Last week was my first day with it. It felt so good to put down on Monday, you need to do this, this, and this. Tuesday, just plan out your whole week. Put a little dinner list on there if you have to. And I check them off. And now I'm back to recording what I do during the day. That was something that I've always done and dropped it. And it just, I was free falling. I felt myself in free fall. So add some normalcy to your day.
Yeah, that's very important. It's very important. I like recording what you actually did each day.
Yeah, I
start
keep
doing
those. And I look back because I say, well, when did I, you know, last hear from so-and-so? When did I turn this in? When did I do that? And I keep those and I can go back through them and say, oh, there it is. I wrote it down.
Right. Or even just, you know, especially during this time, sometimes a whole week will go by in a blur and I'll think, what did I do? I know I did something, but for the life of me, I can't remember what it was.
I know. Yeah, that was happening to me. I was barely making progress on anything. And then when I got the book contracts, I thought, I have to plan this out. I can't just sit here and say, well, the last minute I'll turn this into you. That wasn't going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then what about the rest of my work? How am I going to work that in? I can't just sit down because I don't feel like it. You know, I can't spend all day on that porch reading this and reading that. I've got to get to work. So I'm balancing it now. I still get on the porch.
That's okay. Okay, last question here. I've had several questions on finding an agent, submitting to an agent, and you have an agent, but how have you had this particular agent for quite a while?
Oh, I have agent stories. It was the first of all, I didn't have an agent for the first 18 years, almost 20 years of my career. And the only reason, I was an excellent marketer. I could do that really well. And I still do it. The only reason I decided I needed an agent because at that time, publishers were merging with bigger companies and imprints are being created and then they were being dropped and editors were moving around. I couldn't keep track of where people were or what they were doing or what they wanted. It was just, so I thought maybe now is the time to get an agent. So the first agent that popped out for me was someone that was an editor who left the company she was working for and decided to become an agent. She said, I'm an agent now, I'll handle your stuff. And I didn't realize until someone told me a couple of years later, you were her only client. I thought, well, no wonder she got back to me so fast. No wonder she was such a good cheerleader. Then she decided she didn't want to be an agent, and that was that. So I was left in limbo for a while. We're talking about the 90s, late 90s. I approached another agent. And at that point, I'd had enough books behind me that agents at that stage in the 90s were interested in people with a career. They wanted someone who was going to produce. It wasn't so much the selling of the great big blockbuster book, which is happening now. It was that you're already in the game, you have contacts, you're producing, yes, I'll help. That agent didn't work out. I kept her for a while. Then I found another agent. We're up to 2000 now, 2004, something like that. I stayed with her for 9 years. And it was great in the beginning and then it started to sour. and I never quite knew why. It was just one of those, it's like a marriage. People will tell you that. You just go off of people.
Yeah.
I felt like I was doing the wrong kinds of books, something. So then I stayed without an agent for about a year. And then I approached someone that I had approached before. She was just starting up her clientele. And she said she was, because it was just her client list was full. Wait a little bit. So I waited actually 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah, but there was that year with nobody. So we've been working together for 4 years, and I think she's wonderful. But that's 4 agents. Now, you don't want to be an agent hopper, which I never was. You know, it was because there's like, we're talking from 1990. Well, I stayed with one for 5 years, I think. 5 or 6 years, and then one for 9. So I'm not really jumping ship every 2 seconds. I want it to work.
Yeah. Yeah. So if someone's brand new and they're looking for an agent, I know that especially if you are writing picture books, agents want to know that you have 3 or 4 polished manuscripts done before they're going to really consider you as a client, because they are interested in your body of work.
Yes.
Probably with novels, it's, you do not necessarily 3 or 4, but certainly one really good polished one, and at least another one that's well on its way. Would you have any advice on other tricks, tips, anything like that for approaching an agent, submitting to agents?
You know, I got into that agent part late in my career, not late, but halfway through my career. So I had already been working. When I was looking for an agent, they were not looking for people doing picture books. So this is new to me, that they are actually, it used to be like, okay, do your novel and YA book or whatever, and then if that sells and you develop a name and all that kind, then we'll, you know, then you can start writing picture books, or we'll start submitting your picture books. That was the case for a long time. And now I think that we're having this revival of picture books now.
Yes. Very much so.
So I don't know how much longer this is going to last. The last golden age of picture books lasted about 10 years. We'll see.
And nonfiction picture books are certainly on the rise. That's something even agents are looking for, nonfiction picture books.
This is true. So if you can write, if you're a picture book writer and you're really going to have to do what you said, write 4 polished manuscripts. You're going to have more than one, because they need to know that you can do this again.
Yes.
And it's not a fluke, or that you're going to be satisfied with one book. I've written my one book, it got published, I'm happy, bye. They don't really want that. They've invested in you. So has the publishing house. So they want to know that you're in it for the long haul.
Right. Yeah. And I think too, even though there are a lot more editorial agents than there were when I started in this business about 30 years ago, a lot of agents now will definitely work with the author on getting their manuscript more polished, ready to go before they submit it. You still have to have a certain level of skill. They need to know that you are capable of executing any editorial changes needed. And they're not going to submit something to an editor that doesn't also demonstrate a certain level of skill. And I think a mistake a lot of aspiring authors make is that they submit too soon. They're not at that level yet, and then they get rejected. And the thing is, once an agent has rejected a particular manuscript, you can't submit it back to that agent, even if you've revised it, unless they specifically ask you to do so. So taking the time to really get that level of skill up before you even start your submissions is going to be very important. And trust me, it will save you time in the long run. It really will. Because you could go through 5 years of rejections for a bad manuscript before it finally dawns on you, maybe I should not be submitting this. So,
Yes. Yeah. At some point, the book, if it's going to die, let it die.
yeah.
Go
Yeah.
read something else. You know,
Yeah.
plenty of stuff out there.
Yeah.
Surprisingly, I wanted an editorial agent this time.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted it. You know,
Yeah.
for all the books that I've done, I felt that it was in my best interest to have someone, because I don't always hit it either.
Yeah.
And I love having an editorial agent.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And also there's more demand from editors for projects that have more of a commercial appeal, as you said earlier, maybe than in the past. And some of that has to do with our current situation. They need to know they're taking on books that they can sell quickly, that aren't going to require a lot of time to kind of slowly build an audience. But also that's just the business in general, I think. And an agent will help you, will help see if your book has that commercial hook to it. And if they love the idea, but you don't have that commercial hook yet, depending on the agent, they might help you work on that. Or they may say, here's some suggestions for you. Once you revise it, you can resubmit it to me and I'll take another look. So having that other pair of eyes that who know the market is I think very important right now.
Yeah, the market is hard to read now because we have you to give us these tips and things like that, which is great. But we don't even know what they're doing. Everybody's working remotely.
Yeah.
I can't get a bead on anybody. So
Yeah.
I appreciate having an agent who can go to these people and ask,
Mm-hmm.
what is it you're looking for? What is it that you want?
Yeah.
Though I really hate the ones that say, well, we don't, I'll know it when I see it.
Oh, I know. That's so annoying.
Yeah,
Editors
please.
who do that.
I know it.
Something I've never seen before.
Yes, I know it. There isn't anything you haven't ever seen before. It doesn't exist. It's not in the
Absolutely.
universe.
I think it's really important right now, if you are a writer who is looking at agents or even publishers, most editors and agents have Facebook pages, have Twitter feeds, have blogs, a lot of them do. And as much as we might hate social media or not want to spend our lives on it, I think following a few people who you think you might want to submit to on social media is a good idea, because you will get a sense of their tastes and what they're working on and what they're thinking about and that kind of thing. So that is a tool that is available to you now that we didn't have 30 years ago, so
That's true.
yeah. All right, Candice, well, we've kept you very late tonight and I apologize for that, but thank you so much for
I
this
enjoyed it. I finally got out of my cage.
discussion. Yeah, we let you talk shop for a while.
All I've been doing is talking to my cats.
Yeah, well, oh, we did have a question. What is your cat's name? I think your cat must have wandered by or something at one point.
No, there was the picture that you put up.
That's right.
Of me, and I'm holding a tuxedo cat. That is Winchester, the cat of the world, who had his own blog. He was famous.
Oh my goodness.
But he's been gone for 6 years.
Oh,
I know. When that picture came up, I went, oh, I think I'm going to cry. There's Winchester. I loved him so much.
oh.
So the cats I have now, I don't love as much, but they're here. I kept them out because one would be walking across the keyboard and hollering for food.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
oh, we've had cats appear on these things, dogs, whatever. We're good with that. Well, thank you, Candice. This was great. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for sticking around and asking such great questions. And we will see you all next week. All right.
I have to say hi to Tina Hanlon.
Okay.
Tina's somebody that I know.
Oh, good.
She said
good.
hi. I said hi back.
Nice.
All righty. Thank you all very much for having me.
Oh, this was great. Thanks. Okay. Good night, everybody.
Good night.